The year was 1760, and the Industrial Revolution had begun growing its roots in Britain. It would last until the year 1830, and during this period of time, almost every aspect of daily life was influenced. The previous farmers moved into the big cities. Instead of working in the fields, they were put in factories. The population boomed, and so did the economy. This might sound harmless, but was it really all that good, and what started industrialization in the first place?
Well, before the Industrial Revolution, most people worked as farmers or artisans. You generally produced everything by hand, which was really ineffective. Then, after some great progress in the agriculture, leading to the Agricultural Revolution, the food production was increased, which made it so that there was enough food for everyone, with the added benefit of the fields needing less workers. However, as a side effect of this, many previous farmers lost their jobs, and this was favorable for the industrialization, because now both the demand for manufactured goods and labor increased.
But for the Industrial Revolution to thrive, the old economic system had to be replaced. Back then, they followed an economic philosophy called mercantilism. This system was highly controlled by the government, and it revolved around maximizing exports and minimizing imports. It was based on the idea that there only existed a certain amount of wealth in the economy, which made it unsatisfactory to import, since that wouldn't make the country any money. And well, following this philosophy just wasn't possible, because everyone can't export more than they import. Anyways, can you guess which economic system replaced mercantilism? The answer to that question is capitalism. This economic philosophy was based on the idea that wealth can increase over time. It also encouraged the individual to own the means of productions privately. And this was vitally important for the Industrial Revolution. Now, wealthy entrepreneurs had a reason to invest in mines and factories. A nation also didn't have to export more than they imported, because now trade partners could increase their net wealth even though one would run a trade deficit against the other. This was the perfect breeding ground for the Industrial Revolution. And so, with demand for goods rising and investments rolling in, technology began to advance, with many new innovations being made for the sake of maximizing production. A few of the most important ones being the spinning jenny, coke smelting, and the steam engine. But have you any idea of what these innovations actually were and how they benefited industrialization? Well, here's a quick explanation of some of the most significant ones mentioned earlier.
The spinning jenny was invented by James Hargreaves in 1764, and this innovation was hugely important for the textile industry, which was one of the most important industries in Great Britain. It was also the industry that benefited the most out of the industrialization. With this new innovation, one worker could produce 8 times more thread than before. The coke smelting technique, invented by Abraham Darby. With this method, steel could be produced faster and cheaper, which was hugely beneficial to the industrialization. This was very important since most tools, equipment and machinery would be produced in these materials later. One example being the steam engine, a machine performing mechanical work using steam. With this, it was made possible to produce commodities in large amounts, and additionally also made way for the steam-powered locomotives, which made transporting goods faster than ever before.
All the new technology required quite a bit of space, and because of this, factories had to be built. This meant that those who previously worked in their own small workshops couldn't do that anymore. Now, workers had to move close to the factories and into the cities, this being a process referred to as urbanization.
While this made England's economy prosper, the people and the environment began suffering. The extreme growth of the cities led to most people having to live in horrible conditions. The houses were extremely crowded, the streets were incredibly narrow, and there was no proper waste disposal system. Combine all of this with no hygiene and knowledge on diseases, and you have a perfect place for epidemics to break out, which was what often happened.
Additionally, the environment in the factories wasn't all that great either. As the wealthy capitalists strived for maximum profit, the workers had to carry the load. Most people had to work shifts that could last for up to 12 to 16 hours, 6 days a week with minimum wage. These workers included women and even small children. And not working was out of the picture, because most families needed all the money they could get. even if the working conditions were horrible.
However, the poor working conditions led to the trade unions forming. These organizations would eventually aid every worker who was poorly treated. The trade unions functioned in a way that instead of one worker quitting their job, all workers affiliated with the trade unions would. And this was incredibly bad for the money-hungry capitalists, because if all workers quit, who would continue production? Although, even if it didn't happen immediately, the wealth and quality of life became better for the average person in the end. But you cannot say the same about the environment.
As the Industrial Revolution prolonged, we humans started using exponentially more natural resources for the manufactured goods. This included fossil fuels and other minerals that began polluting the air and waters. Then, during this period, there was also a reduction in biodiversity and lots of destruction of wildlife habitats. Furthermore, it is also possible to track back to this period as the beginning of global warming, which is one of the most talked about issues today.
So, to answer the question, was the industrialization all that good? Well, there's no obvious answer to that, because a lot of people had to suffer during this period, and some problems caused by this revolution still remain today. A huge one being the environmental issues. But in the end, it has paved the way for new technologies and medicine to develop, as well as a safer and more enjoyable way of living for the average Joe. However, you can decide the answer for yourself.